Okay, so this next layer, what we're going to do is talk about some of those shortcuts. So everything that I do with my students, I tend to show the actual interface version of it before I show shortcuts. But one of the things about using Blender is that it is a program that makes you better for all of the shortcuts that you know. There are time-saving exercises. In fact, what I tend to tell students is if you use the same thing multiple times, the same tool, same thing, you should go ahead and learn the shortcut for it. Now, this amazingly overwhelming infographic gives you the shortcuts for everything. So Skylar, we can see that here is how you can pan, rotate, and zoom using the cursor here. So Shift plus middle mouse button, just pressing and holding the middle mouse button gives us the orbit or rotate, and then zooming is Shift plus the middle mouse button scroll. So, or it's just the middle mouse button scroll, but you get a feel for just different ways. And each and every single one of the little doors and corners that I was telling you about has some shortcuts to it. So while this is honestly an overwhelming thing, there's a lot of really helpful stuff here. And the actual file itself sits right here, and you can download it. I think, I might need to relink that. That's okay. Bye-bye. I'll delete that for now and relink it later. But there's all of the shortcuts. That's a great resource for you. And I will maybe refer back to it in the future, but there you go. Okie dokie. So to do this motion, this orbit or rotate motion, you press and hold your middle mouse button on your mouse. Now, if you don't have one of these, or your student doesn't have one of these, then you are going to be forced to use the gizmo in the top right corner. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I highly recommend anybody who uses Blender to make the purge and do the middle mouse button. Get a mouse that's like $9, $8, and get a middle mouse button. So the trackpad, I just don't recommend it. Like when you're only using it for some of these orientations and stuff like that, just because you can accidentally, especially if tap to click going, you can accidentally set something, select something, move something, and it just gets frustrating. So I just would recommend you stick to this, but whatever works for you, works for you. Okay, so that's orbit, middle mouse button, press and hold, drag. Next, if I wanted to pan, which is this button, I'm going to press and hold that middle mouse button, but I'm also going to add Shift on my keyboard. I'll press and hold Shift as well. And now if I have to press and hold Shift first, then middle mouse button, now I can move it around this way. Sweet. So that's the panning button. Next, we have the zoom, and it's just using your scroll wheel going in and out. There are other ways to do this, but that's some of the basics. And as we keep going in this, I'll show more and more stuff of navigating a space, but this is the absolute basics of navigating a space. Next thing to talk about is in Figma, we want to talk about how to add and, let's go in this way. Add, delete, and duplicate objects in object mode and edit mode. So let's have that conversation. Select is there too. So let's have that. So I've already selected things by simply left mouse button clicking on things and releasing, and that's how you can select different objects. To add an object, there are a couple ways to do it. The first way is to go object and then add, and then you can choose mesh. You see there's a bunch of different things. For now, we're going to stick with mesh just to keep it simple, right on rails. So I've got a cube already. I'm going to go ahead and add a plane, and you can see that that plane shows up directly inside that cube. We also see the plane shows up in my outliner. I'm going to add a whole bunch of objects, and then we're going to start moving them around. So add, mesh, we'll do UV sphere. And you can see that I've got a UV sphere, but it only shows up as a circle. Let's go ahead and move that real fast. So I'm going to grab this cube, and I want to move it. So over here I have some tools, and that first tool is the move tool, and this shows up as a gizmo. So the gizmo is this little multicolored object that shows up right here. Now, I've zoomed in on my whole screen so you could see that. But the arrow colors correspond with the axis that I'll move in. So I'm going to move it on the x-axis. If I click on this, that gizmo, because I'm still in this tool, moves it here. And already, just by showing you these three things, I'm showing you how to actually do more than most people know. When they open Blender, try to move the cube, they can't move the cube, they close Blender, they never open it back up again. That's pretty normal for an experience for people who just want to try to dabble. And if you are really trying to learn something, that's not the best way to do it. So I'm glad you're here so that you can kind of move things around with us. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do another add, but this time instead of hitting the add button up here from the menus, I'm going to hit Shift+A. That's our first shortcut. Shift, hold, A. Actually, I guess it would be our second because we had Shift and middle mouse button before. But now we can see this word add that corresponds to that word add. It's the same exact menu, just shows up wherever your cursor is. And I'm going to go ahead and keep adding some things. So I'm going to go add and then mesh and icosphere. I'll move that around. Shift+A, add cylinder. And let's move that around. Shift+A, add, and we'll do a cone. We'll go straight up with that cone. And then Shift+A, and we'll do a torus now. There are many, many other options that you can start to bring into this. But for now, this is a really great start. Just to kind of get a feel for the different objects and how you add them. Now, I also want to show you how to duplicate and how to delete objects. But before I go any farther, I'm going to give you a minute to just hit Shift+A and add some mesh. Try to stay away from these other ones for now. If you're not somebody who gets panicky, you can add them and just delete them in your outliner when you're done. But for now, if you want to just stick to adding some of our base shapes, that would be good.